Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. My name is Celeste Wong. I am one of the features programmers for SF Doc Fest. Really, really excited to be joined today by one of the co-directors of Norita, Jason McNamara. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We're so thrilled to be showing Norita, such a powerful, incredibly important, and very timely film. Um, and I'm curious if you could just take us back to the beginning, give us a little bit of insight into how you and your co-director, Andrea Tortonese, first came up with the idea and how you first approached it.
So I was working in Argentina as a newspaper journalist, and Andrea was working with the Mothers of Plaza de Mayo organization in their archive and communications department. So she and I had crossed paths a couple of times doing, she was always sort of the go-to person if you wanted to talk to one of the mothers of Plaza de Mayo in their 80s and 90s at the time. We're talking about about 10 to 15 years ago when we first met. And it was very, as film and documentary often tends to be, it was very impulsive. We were sort of like, oh, I like you. I like your work. Like maybe we can collaborate on something. And in fact, the animation in the film was one of the first things to be born, so to speak, out of our discussions and conversations and brainstorming. So yeah, really two things. We both were fascinated by Norita, this very impressive political force in Argentina, a very tiny, physically tiny woman, but a very mighty political force. And we both wanted to work together, and I really wanted Andrea to do animations for the film. So yeah, that's sort of like a clumsy walk through the beginning of what became a sort of 7 year process of filming Nora, designing animations, collecting all the historical archive, and putting together a film that tells the life of a 90-year-old woman essentially in 90 minutes. I guess is the way I like to describe it, which was a huge challenge editorially to get this very dramatic life condensed and told in a feature without losing the complexity and the depth and and especially the emotion of the story.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to ask you about that editorial feat because there's also, on top of everything, with Norita telling her own story, there's so much archival footage as well. And I have to imagine that was a huge endeavor to approach, you know, sifting through all of that and then deciding how to weave it into the story. It's so smooth the way it transitions from present to past and using that footage. But can you tell us a little bit about the process of just sifting through all of that and it coming together in the editing?
The archive, it's really interesting. I like to describe the Mothers of Plaza de Mayo resistance movement as sort of one of the first resistance movements to be televised in color in the history of the moving image, because this is sort of the mid to late 70s, and there's just these powerful images of the mothers protesting for their missing children every Thursday in front of the government house in Buenos Aires. And I remember the first time that I saw one of those images, I thought, oh, there must be more. There must be so much more out in the world. So we cast a very wide net. We went to archives in the US, in Europe, as well as in Argentina to find as much as we could to build that world of the dictatorship in Argentina. Obviously, there's it's very it's very rare to find material that shows what actually was going on underground, which was horrendous. So you know, the archive being one layer, we also had to find other ways and other resources and devices to really get to the heart of what was going on at the time, which was what Norita, our protagonist, describes as the crime of all crimes, which is disappearing, physically disappearing someone forever, and the family not having a body to put to rest, not having a place to mourn, not knowing anything about where, why, how, who, and just living in this sort of eternal limbo. And that's where, you know, we have the testimonies of other survivors, testimonies of the sort of lived experience of Nora's family, and then the archive sitting in there to try as best as possible to help audiences visualize what was a very horrendous period of time in Latin America more broadly, not just in Argentina.
Yeah, and you touched upon this a little earlier. One of the tools that I think you use really well in the film to show that is the animation that you said Andrea did. So, um, yeah, I'm wondering if you could just speak to that a little bit more, knowing Andrea isn't here with us in this conversation right now, but if you could speak to maybe what she took as her approach for those sections of the film.
With the animation, I think, or with animation generally, I think the its power rests in the fact that um, it had animation has a lot to do with how we are introduced to stories as children. So there's this lightness and this sort of infantile, playful aspect of animation, which in the case of our very dense, dark, heavy adult story, was this amazing tool to be able to create the light and the dark. And also, you know, the animation really illustrates the hardest, gravest, most horrendous parts of the story. And so I think it really helps audiences navigate what they would otherwise turn away from, because it's just so horrendous. And at this time and period, you know, there's this huge resistance at the moment to want to, you know, people want to turn the other way. They want to be distracted on this, you know, by scrolling on their phones. They don't want to know about politics. They don't want to know about, let alone the past, you know. So the animation is a really, really, I think not only a very important aesthetic tool for the film, it's also a very important political tool for the storytelling and the film as a project.
Absolutely, yeah. Um, I really love how even amidst the really challenging content in the film and the history, there is a lot of hope in the film, and so much of that it comes through in many different ways. But I want to ask you specifically about the focus on the intergenerational bonds that are shown. I mean, probably one of the most memorable parts for me is just watching Norita just walk down the street and having so many people just come up to her one after another, and they're all different ages and they're all different backgrounds, and they just tell her how much they are inspired by her. Can you talk about that intergenerational approach? It comes through in several ways in the film.
Yeah, thank you for asking me about that because I think that it's really, as an Australian man who sort of a guest to all of this, and I think just to mention, I think Andrea and my collaboration really has a lot to do with that. There's a value in having an outsider's perspective, and there's a value in having the perspective of someone like Andrea, who's an Argentinian woman who was born in the dictatorship and who lived the experience of, you know, the return of democracy in the 80s and all the protests for the human rights trials. So we kind of brought these two perspectives together. And I can speak from my perspective that I think it's a real common thread in Latin American societies that older people are there's more, I think there's just generally more respect for older people and their journeys and their stories. Um, it's a society that really venerates the grandmother figure, la abuela, and Norita has, because her political activism starts when she's about 50. Her son was disappeared in 1977. She was about 50 at the time. So there's a really sort of a dividing line in her life between this sort of typical conservative suburban housewife and, you know, rock star political activist who, is the centerpiece of all these contemporary struggles for human rights and for women's rights. There's this really sharp dividing line, which is tragically the disappearance of her son. So she takes the quality of, she has the qualities of a typical abuelita, typical granny, but she also has this political edge to her. And I just feel like people in Argentina, that's just the perfect combination to get people to listen in, to lean in and hear what she had to say, because it's that softness and that hardness, that gentle grandmother quality, and then some really strong. She never minced her words. This is not a person who danced around the edges. There's a great moment at the beginning of the scene where she says, we don't forgive, we don't forget, and there's no reconciliation. And that is at the top end of the film. Like, this is not a story about peace and love. This is going to be a fight, It's going to be a fight, and it's going to keep going even beyond me as a person. So, yeah, I mean, I naturally venerate her, but I just think she was a fantastic little political package, and people, fortunately in Argentina, people were able to see that while she was alive and celebrate her for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I wanted to ask you about the journey of the film. I guess maybe since shooting it or noticing that you've got some pretty heavy hitters as executive producers. I noticed Jane Fonda's name up there, Naomi Klein, and others. I'm just curious, like at what stage they came on board, what was that like? Um, and yeah, if you could just speak a little bit to their involvement.
Absolutely. So that is, I think, again, a testament to the importance that the Mothers of Plaza de Mayo have in the history of of Latin American sort of anti-capitalist, anti-globalization politics. These are women who, especially in the case of Norita, I think understood that what their children were fighting for was not just some colorful sort of Che Guevara inspired epic to happen in their own countries, but for deep economic change and for this massive underclass of people in Latin America to finally be lifted up and to enjoy the massive resource wealth that exists in Latin America. That was, it wasn't some trivial battle for power. There was some real substance to it, and I think the mothers, in a way, were able to translate that in through the different periods of history following the return of democracy in Argentina, and so people like Naomi Klein, people like Jane Fonda, they're obviously aware of this amazing women-led movement, and I think it was just a natural fit when we approached each and every one of them personally to say, "Will you put your name to this project?" Um, they didn't take a lot of convincing. I mean, to say like, it's the power of the story, it's the power of the legacy of the mothers that got them all over the line. So. I should also mention Gustavo Santolaya, who was the who led the composition of the music, we approached him, Oscar-winning musician, to see if he would write one track for the film, because he knew Nora personally, and we approached him and he said, "Oh, I'll do all of the music. I'll also help you guys with the storytelling, and I can look at the cuts and I can put you in contact with people." So we've really enjoyed so much goodwill. Speaking, on behalf of the producers Sarah Sholkoff, Melissa Daniels, Francisco Villa, and myself. We're a little team, little indie project, but we really had some big guns, so to speak, to get us over the line.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, the music is amazing. It's so beautiful. Um, and you really feel that collaborative spirit come through because everyone is just so impacted and inspired by Norita. Um, and yeah, I wanted to ask you, so the film has gone on to screen at many awesome festivals around the world and here in the United States as well. And so I'm curious now, like at this stage of where the film is at, what the kind of reaction has been like, what it's been like to finally bring it out to the audiences.
It's been really positive. I think one of the achievements of the film, which is what we actively looked for, was to tell a story that Argentinians would embrace and would be appreciative of. Was condensed and diluted enough that it could be understood in universal terms outside of Argentina. And so we wanted it to be simple and complex at the same time. And we we tested it a lot with Nora and the people close to her, just to always make sure that it was hitting the right marks, for her inner circle, which we knew would eventually translate into Argentinians appreciating it. So um, one of the things that we've done, which I think is a massive achievement, we've done a grassroots campaign, a screening campaign in Argentina, where I think over 300 community and grassroots organizations, unions, feminist groups, schools, libraries, community centers, professional associations, universities, 300 of those all across the country. And the film is it's in hot demand. Like everyone wants that at their community center, at their university. So that's ongoing. And then we've done a heap of screenings across Latin America where the reaction has been the same. Like Latin Americans feel the mothers are their own and Norita is their own. And I think that is really beautiful and really exciting. And in the United States, we've always had our our finger on the pulse of what has been happening in the US over the course of the 7 years that we did the project. And, fortunately for us, I think unfortunately, at every major turn in the last 7 years, we've looked at each other and said, this film is becoming more and more relevant for an American audience. And, while we're obviously excited that the film can play a part in a discussion and give hope to, what is a society whose, sense of optimism is pretty broken at the moment. It's disappointing that a story like this is relevant in the United States in 2025. Let's just say that. But yeah, we're excited to keep going. We're yet to conquer Europe, so we want to get there. And being at festivals like your guys is the good way to get some visibility and attention there. But yeah, it's been very positive, and we're very grateful.
Thank you. Well, yeah, I can't wait to have more audiences see it and share it. Is there a website or social media where folks should keep up with it if they want to spread the word, if they want to keep up with the impact campaigns and all of that?
Absolutely. Yeah, we have fa on Facebook and Instagram. If you search for Norita Film, you'll find us. And then otherwise, noritafilm.com.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for taking the time and chatting with us. Thank you for sharing this incredible film with us and with the world. And thank you all for watching.
Thank you guys. I hope you enjoy it.